Tuesday, November the 13th, meeting of the Raleigh Conservation Commission. The meeting is hereby called to order under the authority of the Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw and Stormwater Management and Erosion Control Bylaw. Notice is given that both a video and an audio recording will be made of this meeting. The agent will now call the roll for attendance.
Arthur Page.
Here.
Kurt Turner.
Here.
Bob Garner.
Here.
Judy Keys.
Here.
Dan Shinnick.
Here.
Sam Strife. He's going to be a little late, he told me. Howard Vogel. Here. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum present.
All right, very good. Well, that brings us to our first item, payroll and or vendor bills.
I would like to request approval. We received an invoice just today for Horsley Whitman for the consultant services they have provided so far in the peer review of the land off Daniels Road.
So we're gonna get another bill besides this, I assume, because they haven't had a chance to read.
Now that we have finally received just some submittals today, yes, I anticipate that. It is my hope that they will review those to see if the applicant's representative has appropriately addressed the various requested omissions, revisions, and plan massages. That's the backup invoice. Thank you. And that's all for the bill type category.
All right, the next item on the agenda is we have minutes for October 23rd, 2018, November 13th, 2012, and December 4th, 2012. We'll do them as three separate items. These copies of these were mailed out electronically to the board members. Did everybody have a chance to look at the October 23rd, 2018? Was there any questions? One change which I saw, and I believe the correction was sent.
Yes.
Yes. So,
As well as we also discovered that we needed to use, we had inadvertently used certificate of completion. Excuse me, we had used certificate of compliance and we meant to use certificate of completion. We were supposed to have 3 uses of completion. We had inadvertently gotten one certificate of compliance stuck in there because of course they're similar, so we fixed it once we were directed. Yeah. Title is
could
correct.
be me, I'm not. Everybody had a chance to see that? Do I hear a motion to accept that as the final presentation was made?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That brings us to the November 13th, 2012. Everybody have a chance to look at the electronic version of that? Any questions, alterations, misprints, or anything? Noted? Do I hear a motion to accept that as presented then?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, who seconded that? Dan, thank you.
That brings us to the final one, which is the December 4th, 2012. Everybody have a chance to look at the electronic version of that? Any questions, problems, alterations? Do I hear a motion to accept that as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Seconded, approved, thank you.
Moving right along here. Next item is 50 Newbury Road, map 5, parcel lot 41. ONG Design and Development Land Grant. Over to our agent.
Yep, just a moment. Okay. Commission may recall that this applicant has an open space residential development, which one component of that is creation of an open space parcel. And in this instance, the applicant wishes to deed that to the town instead of doing a conservation restriction and retaining ownership. As part of that process, the applicant had come into us when they discovered that the existing landowner who they had purchased the property from had a propane tank, and where they had laid out one of the boundary lines of the open space parcel was actually cutting like a third or a quarter off of the propane tank. They had neglected to take the positioning of the propane tank into account when they started putting boundaries. So so they came into the commission to request changing that proposed boundary line, and at the same time, because I had been working with them on evaluating the parcel for the limits of clearing, we had noticed an area that they were going to create 2 dedicated parking spaces and a trail that gave access and public parking to, for the public to enter and enjoy the preserved open space. And we noticed that where those parking spaces were being positioned was going to result in a bunch of cutting of a bank of gravel that was treed, and therefore that would also necessitate the removal of a number of trees. So at the same time they had to adjust the boundary line, they also made an adjustment to the positioning of those dedicated parking spaces so that it would not result in so much cutting and filling in order to put those spaces in. So that presented a delay, and Natural Heritage and Endangered Species had recommended a condition to be applied to the project that required them within 3 months of their inception of the work on the ground. I believe it was 3 months. They had a deadline to facilitate and have made the transfer and presented the property to the town for acquisition. They were behind on their engineering because they had to re-engineer the plans and everything else, and they requested a 1-month extension. They communicated to the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program, who via an email just received on November 6th, said that, well, thank you for contacting the division regarding the conveyance of the open space parcel B. By way of this email, the division approves a 30-day extension to December 13th, 2018 for the transfer of the open space parcel B. Please submit a copy of the revised open space plan to the division to review these minor changes. If you have questions, please let me know. So the commission, since the commission had adopted and incorporated that condition into the order of conditions, and here before you tonight to request that the commission also grant that extension, where we've got Natural Heritage being okay with it. I don't foresee any detrimental impact to the conditioning of the project, and it's best to have a proper conveyance.
Certainly. Not holding anybody up with propane, or it's not holding any construction up, anything like that.
No.
That'd be
No, in
better.
fact, I did tell them that I'm signing the building permit request tomorrow, but because technically they're not in compliance as of today, today was the day we thought that
Yeah.
that should have been facilitated.
All right, do I hear such a motion? Does anybody have any questions or anything with it?
That seems reasonable.
Yeah.
This is the extension.
Any questions from
Very
the public?
Any questions from anybody in the audience in regards to this?
I will move that.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Good evening.
Okay, let's see. Thank you very much.
That brings us to our next administrative item, which is emergency certifications for beaver-related activity at 532 Weathersfield Street, map 11, parcel 3, lot 3, and Dodge Road, Lower Mill Pond Dam, map 10, parcel 5, lot A8. I turn this over to you, I think you're the... I can always turn it over to Howard, he was impressed with it.
Well, so the first,
Order.
the first one, 532 Weathersfield Street, property owner is Ms. Deborah Rossi. The commission was actually contacted by an above river, I should say, upriver property owner, 548, the Lucia Herrick Realty Trust, because the water level had risen, whereas it had been rather constant, I guess, through most of the summer, and it rose and was flooding and making access to their farmed fields and the rest of their property by the historic farm crossing rather problematic. So we met with Ms. Rossi and found that there was a dam under the bridge that forms her driveway access that was transmitting because of very small elevational changes between the property. It was transmitting the increased water levels and making the Lucia Herrick folks having problems with access, which is problematic. And so utilizing these criteria under the Board of Health, they issued a permit, and we issued a permit which allows temporary breaching of an existing dam located at 532 Weathersfield Street on the Mill River under the driveway bridge, solely to alleviate the flooding of an upstream vehicle crossing for agriculture harvesting at 548 Weathersfield Street, owned by Lucia Herrick Realty Trust. So I'm requesting that the commission vote to confirm the issuance of the emergency certification.
Yes. Do I hear such a motion?
So moved.
So that's just for that one at this point?
Right.
Yeah, do them one at a time. Yeah, and then second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You don't know how that's gone so far?
I don't,
As of the other
it's
day,
on my
it wasn't
list,
doing
it's
very
on my
good.
list of things to get in contact with her and find out.
There was
Right.
water all over that bridge today. Back up,
No, it was when we were there, but I imagine it got worse.
or got.
Okay, if I could request your signatures.
Okay.
So the second emergency certification has been requested on behalf of the town highway department, highway surveyor, and also in conjunction with seeing that the Lower Mill Pond Dam, the beaver activity has almost completely sealed what is the historic sluiceway, and there is water coming out both the right and left, or the north and south sides of the dam structure, as well as coming out of places of the dam structure that water has never ever come out of before, because it's never been meant to have reached heights to get there. So the main issue is that on the side towards the country club, the south side, water is now flowing across through an adjacent parcel. It's coming up by the side of the road, actually coming out onto the pavement. It's then coming down a bank, which is adjacent to the bridge abutment and is rip-wrapped with large trap rock, I think is what it's described as. The problem with that is it's not meant to be a sluiceway. It doesn't, more than likely does not have geotextile fabric underneath there and was not constructed to take water flow. Supposedly, according to all our engineering, when the bridge was permitted and put in, there was never water reaching over in that area. And so this is a request for emergency certification to allow the town highway department, and I think they're working in conjunction with the light department for some reason. We did receive permission to enter because that is not town property. So permission to enter and authorization from the health department has been received for that, and this is for the removal of accumulated debris, partially wind-driven, some man-made, and beaver-placed woody plant material debris that is restricting water flow through the spillway of the old private dam. Removal should be done in a controlled, steady manner to slowly release flow into the natural stream channel.
Who is the actual owner of the dam?
The heirs of Marion B. Tompkins.
Under Massachusetts, aren't they responsible?
Well, she's deceased,
Well, isn't the landowner?
and I believe the information I've received is that it hasn't been probated, so we did contact one of the heirs, but they haven't, we had to finesse this.
So who actually gave us, who's authorizing this from a permission standpoint?
Mr. Bruce Tompkins,
So that's been accomplished,
yes.
okay.
Well, we're gonna pick up the tab.
Well, yes, in order to preserve our highway infrastructure and not see damage to the bridge or transportation infrastructure, yes, I believe that.
Now, all the dams in Massachusetts are supposed to be inspected as of 3 years ago. How did that one fare?
Well, it was inspected in 2012, and the Office of Dam Safety is aware of this, and they've also were made aware of this situation too, but in this particular instance did not offer any direct help. Before 2012, they dispatched a contractor who did the removal of the debris in the sluiceway.
Okay, so we're voting on what, have the highway do it?
Confirmation of the emergency certification, yes.
I would just express the thought that it would be helpful if these things could be resolved more quickly, recognizing that there may be, legal hoops that need to be jumped through, but now that we've cut through this one, the emergency was several days, if not a week ago, and we're still having problems with more water coming down, so it'd be great if these things could be addressed more quickly in the future.
Well, actually, these were addressed several years ago and nothing really happened.
Well,
But we can't lose the bridge again, so I would think we'd be looking into that, or have somebody look into that, and somebody keep track of the hours.
Well, we've
so somebody
encouraged,
can pay for it.
the Office of Dam Safety has been encouraged to address this, and
The dam office, is that what they call it?
The dam.
All right, do we hear a motion to put the emergency
So,
rehab onto this, which will only be a temporary thing, because they can't really do anything.
well, this
unless
is
they
allowed
put
for
a dam
for
up.
30 days.
to go in and do it.
For
if they
30
want to.
days, they can do the bridging. They can lower the water level.
Yeah. Raise that for motion.
So, she wants.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Right, that's what we got, across that bridge. run across that bridge with my grandkids, they say, hey, Grandpa, you think the newspaper will come out and say, who's that crazy guy out there looking at the dam? I said,
Thank you. All right, this is a legal notice of Raleigh Conservation Commission. In accordance with the Wetlands Protection Act, Mass General Law 131, Section 40, as amended in the Town of Raleigh Wetlands Protection Bylaw, a public hearing will be held on Tuesday, November 13th, 2018, at 7:45 PM, Room 5, Town Hall Annex, 39 Central Street, to consider the notice of intent. Application filed by Town of Raleigh Board of Selectmen, Deborah M. Egan, Town Administrator, for the proposed construction of playing fields, expansion of gravel area, installation of water quality swales, possibly within a 100-foot buffer zone to the bordering vegetated wetlands at 215 Rear Main Street, map 25, parcel 37, lot 1, and 221 Rear Main Street, map 25, parcel 35, lot 1 in Raleigh, Mass. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm April Ferraro with Meridian Associates. Debbie Egan is also here with the Town Selectman's office. The first plan here is just a overview aerial plan for orientation of where the project is. This is Main Street here, and Pine Grove School is right there. And the project is located at 221 Rear, which is this parcel here, as well as 215 Rear, which is a sliver of land back here. All told, the parcels end up being just under 4.5 acres of land. And you can see from the aerial the existing use. Both of them are fields right now. The one on 215 Rear is more of a grass field. There are soccer fields in this area, and Pine Grove School uses this area for recess, and they also use it for gym classes. Brett and I were out on a site walk last week, and there was a gym class out there running around. So that's what this piece is used for here. There's also a existing gravel parking area here, which is surrounded by several large boulders, sort of encompassing the area, keeping it secure. And the area on 221 Rear, that's more of a hay grass, if you will. It's not hayed, but it's obviously not full-on grass either. So it's kind of
Right now, those are both town pieces of land at this point?
Pardon me?
Yes.
They're both town now.
They're both owned by the town, yes.
Yes. Yep.
221 rear and 215 rear,
221 rear is a newer acquisition, or?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So this is just the engineering record conditions plan, again, the two parcels, the bold lines here, 221, 215. The wetland line was, there's bordering vegetated wetland out there delineated by DeRosa Environmental in April of this year. That's the green line on the plan, and its associated buffer zones represented by the blue line on the plan. One other thing to note is the area itself. Here, the topography across the property is quite nice for an athletic use. It ranges between 1.5% to 2.5%. So just enough that it's not overly steep, but has slope enough to actually keep things moving across it, which is really great. So what we would like to propose is a new Little League field in the corner with area that could be used for another soccer field. Just sort of outlined right now that it could be used for that. There's space for it. We would also like to take this existing parking area and expand it about just shy 70 feet towards the wetland and about 60 feet wide. That will allow, two cars to park and back out without causing too much pain. It's worth noting that that piece is actually the new gravel area is just outside the 100-foot buffer over there, but we do have a little bit of management within the buffer in that area there. So the project is subject to the stormwater standards. But we are not proposing any new impervious area with the project, so most of the existing to proposed conditions are the same. But we have met the standards. We are proposing some treatment swales, erosion controls, operation and maintenance for the project. We have conservatively proposed a swale along this 25-foot line here. Just to catch anything that may be coming off the fields. It may be a little bit of an over conservative measure. There should just be, it is just a grass field. So if the commission would rather us not do that, that would certainly be fine. But it would be there as a treatment measure should anything come off the field. The one, the swale that is of course the important one is the one right off the end of the expanded gravel parking area there. That we want to keep in place for treatment of anything that might be coming off that gravel area from the cars. But again, as I noted before, we've got a good 100 feet from that area to where the resource area is. It is worth noting that this swale area, when Brent and I were out on the site walking it last week, that swale is located in where there's a little patch of knotweed. So in order for us to make sure that we take care of that correctly and not cause a spread of the knotweed throughout the site, we think it would be worth working with DeRosa Environmental for an invasive species management plan to make sure that we got rid of it and got rid of the appropriate soil underneath that we needed to, so that we didn't cause any spread of invasives from that particular patch. One other note on the Little League field, the grass area. I was reviewing this plan in-house this afternoon and realized that the notations that we have on there for the grass area, the root zone mixes, is really more of a professional grade mix. And due to the agricultural nature of the existing site, We know that there's gonna be 12 to 18 inches worth of loam underneath there. Rather than stripping everything down, removing all the loam, trucking in a whole bunch of new material, what we'd actually like to do is strip the material on site, screen the loam, and reuse it, because it should be viable material for supporting growth of grass in that area. So we'd like to do that to save on moving of materials. And that would just be a little, we can make a revision to the plan to note that. Obviously, it's not shown on the information that you have in front of you. And finally, one last item that was unintentionally omitted from the design plan. Part of the condition of the sale of 221R from 221 was that we were to install a fence between the properties of 221 and 221R here. And as you can see, that property line does run through the resource area in some places. So we wanted to bring this to the commission's attention and to brainstorm some amenable solutions so that we could meet this condition of the sale, whether it's, you know, fencing without, you know, with an open bottom, or whatever the commission might be amenable to, so that we can complete that condition of the sale.
Any questions right this minute?
Yeah, I'm sorry, so when the field is actually in operation, how far will grass be cut? Like, how far will you go out?
So in other words, the mowed area will be.
Yeah, what will be the mowed area when the field is in operation?
When the field is in operation, the mowed area will be pretty close to where the 25-foot is on this corner.
Which is the dark line we see on the board.
Which
at the
is,
top.
yeah, which is the dark line up there. And then it is currently mowed up to the 25-foot right now.
It is.
So that would be maintained, we wouldn't be
You
mowing any more than
permitted that.
And-
Yes, that's
yeah,
what we did last meeting.
Is there any kind of, you know, markings there so that they know that that's where they mow to, or?
Right now, there are tall stakes that
Yeah.
Brent installed so that they knew
Okay.
the location
always
of the
been.
25.
Okay.
You mean something like that?
Yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever, you know, as they,
all that way.
Yellow diagonal stripe. and
Now,
orange on
what type of
6
fence was it that you had originally agreed to put up?
Actually,
We were thinking
Chris?
of chain, like a
Chain link,
Chain
a
link,
5-foot chain link or something like that.
Just to
Yeah.
keep
Just
dogs?
to keep,
kids?
no, people are
Some
gonna be walking
separation.
through there.
Is it going
They're already
all the way
doing it.
down?
Well,
So,
that's what they're saying, it would have to run into the wetlands,
Yeah. How are you gonna do
the
that?
100-year wetlands there.
and I'm sorry, can you identify yourself for the record?
Oh,
sir?
Chris Wynn, Main Street, excuse me, front.
So the regulations under the Wetlands Protection Act will allow the commission and provide guidance that the fence should have a 6-foot,
Or 6, whatever.
6-inch
6-inch.
6-inch
Under.
spacing underneath, so that small mammals or whatever, most of them would probably tunnel under, whether you gave
Woodchucks.
them space or not, but, yeah, woodchucks, rabbits,
Yeah.
the deer and the antelope are gonna go skipping over probably anything you
Yeah,
put
it's more
on.
she's worried about people just walking through,
Right.
because they're gonna cut,
Right, so
they
that
go
would,
to the ball field, come down Pleasant Street, and just blow right through there, you
yeah,
know?
well, somebody's already mowed a path through it anyway, so, one of the residences there, so, this
You know,
will,
the school down
cease
behind the
that.
property, excuse me from interfering, on the right-hand side of our property, the school where the soccer field is now is that much higher than ours. They filled it back when they did it a number of years ago. So it's, when you take all that old shrub and everything that's along there, the property where the school is about that far higher than us. You don't see that with all the hedge and everything that's all along there, that's separating where the soccer field
Is
and
it
all
cost,
land.
is it costing flooding?
It's caused to be wet, that area that they've got delineated, it's sticking away, 3/4 of the way across that was never that wet before that. Between that, and the only reason why the rest of it's wet is because that culvert's half collapsed under Bradstreet Lane. That used to run all out, years ago, used to run right out of there. That's become wet because it doesn't drain across under 1A.
Yeah, we're familiar
It's
with
like
that
trapped.
culvert.
Yeah, it's trapped
I didn't
water.
know it was, it is.
It's gotten wetter, yeah, it's gotten, since that, the grade comes back further this, you know.
Well, not that the town needs any more work, but they
Yeah, well, no,
can check
right.
it out and blow it out or whatever.
Yeah.
I think the highway department through our permitting with Mr. Sabatini for his
I don't know if he's done
upgrade
it.
of the area. No, I'm not, no. The highway surveyor would need to be consulted, but I believe he had it on.
Yeah, I know it's on his
list.
agenda and, yeah, but, yeah, I don't think he's done it.
But respective to this parcel, no, a plan modification, and I don't know, the commission, I guess we just have to think of how to actually have the installation done, so at either a particular time of year or something, so that it isn't.
Oh, the
when they're
fencing itself? Yeah.
No, when they actually install the fencing, one would want to facilitate it at a time of year that they weren't sinking up to their axles and whatever to get whatever they need to
And
get
it
out
will probably
there,
need to
so-
be done closer to the end of the project to not get in their own way.
Right,
Um,
but
But,
I think that's easy enough to facilitate it
Yeah.
unless the commissioners have some concern. You know, habitat value-wise or whatever, just, that would actually discontinue some of the inadvertent intrusions that have already occurred over there, so.
Yeah.
As to whether the commission wants to consider providing a condition that would, you know, I guess you have to consult with somebody at some point in time, but maybe the best way to do this is to leave the door open for vegetation management to occur in that field area, that if the town wishes to like mow it once every 2 years to discourage woody vegetation from moving into there.
It's not the woody vegetation as much as the invasive.
Yeah,
Well-
the prickers start growing, once you let all that stuff in, you should have seen
Yeah.
what it looked like years ago. It did get let go at one point, and it was just these big thickets growing everywhere, and you know, it's just nature.
So again,
Well, that ought to help
That-
keep the pedestrians down.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you could plan a row of them, that'd be cool, yeah.
We can do that.
They used to be all dry though. My grandfather had the roadside stand. He had that whole field in gardens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any other questions or statements to be made from the audience in regards to this before we start hashing it on? All right, I think we got several things here. Everything, you needed the parking, it gets you right close to the wetland, you were out of the wetlands. If there's enough room for that ball field with just the dock area that we had, that would meet enough room to have a ball field for the kids?
Yeah, you need 200 feet, and
Yeah.
that line is 200 feet.
Oh, that is 200.
That curve.
That curve.
Yeah, this last curve here, that's the 200-foot line, that's what you need.
Okay, but then you've got the soccer field outside of that.
Yeah, yes, and that is, the soccer fields are more of a variable. It can go anywhere from 300 feet wide to 150 feet wide, depending on age groups and things like that.
Now, usually they have them, because they both coincide with the same seasons, there's no way you could have that outside of that, if they turned it, like the way they are now?
Is there a fence,
No.
200 foot?
No,
There's not?
nope,
Okay.
there's not. No, there's a fence by the by the
back.
dugouts and the backstop, but that's it.
Are they gonna put a green monster up there? These kids can hit nowadays, you know.
So that soccer field would replace the soccer field they're using now?
There was a couple fields.
Because the other one goes
Yeah.
down, this goes the other way, right?
Yeah.
Right, I think this is in addition to it. It may be a
Yeah,
different,
they could
like,
play so they
group
could
of
use.
kids using it.
Fall,
Yeah.
in fall, there's no Little League really in the fall, so the Parks and Rec have vetted all this, and they have a plan on how they're gonna juggle the usage of the field.
Yeah, it's an attempt at multiple use to
Right.
extend the seasonal use of that particular.
There's a
We're only
need
here,
for-
we're only here for the
They have a lot.
wetlands, so,
Yeah, there's a lot of Rowley children in the Triton Youth Soccer Program. A lot of them are Rowley kids, and we're trying to address the need for the soccer.
Give them a playing field.
And the Little League field is currently next to Well Station 2, and the DEP is saying that that's Zone 1 and really doesn't belong there. So it's, we did try to do this on the Brad Street active recreation parcel. That was the parcel that was carved out for ball fields, but it's not, the terrain is impossible.
Right, yeah.
To make any kind of ball fields out of
Soils
there.
needed to be engineered to.
So would this ball field replace that ball field on 133?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
great.
And it's
This
just a
is better
safety
parking,
concern,
safer.
there's no parking in that
Yeah, it's
location.
terrible.
The children are Little League age.
Oh, yeah, that's terrible.
So they're walking on 133.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I
Okay.
apologize for not having a memo
Yeah.
prepared for you, I just ran out of time today. But, so there's two things. One that we've partially covered, and that is the clump of Japanese knotweed, which is located almost exactly where the swale for water interception is planned to go. So in consulting, DeRosa Environmental put out a booklet about invasive species control, and their recommended strategy is for excavation of the root balls of the Japanese knotweed and then burning or some other type of entombment. Now, this project is not going to result in any 10-foot deep excavations, so I doubt the root balls can be entombed on this particular
Is that how deep they
project.
go?
That's what they're recommended. Entomb it 10 feet down and put geotactile impermeable membrane over it to prevent them from ever seeing the sunlight again. But irrespective of that, burning it seems to be the other strategy, burning the root balls.
Is this in an area where it can be repetitively mowed?
Well, no, because the boulders and the stormwater swale are
The
going to be
boulders are
located.
keeping the cars from getting into there.
But I'm trying to say that this patch of knotweed was not planted to be outside of where the boulders and the parking and the stormwater swale are supposed to go. It happens to inadvertently be pretty much right in that spot. So the best, cheapest strategy is to cut it, dig out the root balls, and either arrange that it be burned in a pile of brush that's burned, or to transport it to some other site where burning and proper disposal can take place. But if it isn't, it is spreading from a source, and that is probably one of these clone clumps that actually isn't wind dispersal of the seeds. It may not even produce viable seeds, but what it is doing, it is spreading by rootlets there. I mean, it's an almost exact egg shape or oval, which all points to it starting from just a common seed source.
Chris, how long has that been there, do you know?
That knotweed has come and gone. We used to cut it all the time, get rid of it.
I mean, it's been there since you were
Been
there.
there for quite some time, yeah.
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 So the easiest strategy is to dig it out at the time that digging and site preparation is already
Makes
into
sense.
there.
Makes sense, right?
And if the commission is comfortable with the proposal for fencing to go along the boundary chain link with the 6-inch separation from the ground, we'll just have to work with whatever a recommended strategy is for time of year and when it can be put in, so there's the least impact.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that too.
I already mentioned my other suggestion, that we might want to leave a provision, a perpetual provision, so that the wet meadow, no cut, no disturbance zone could be mowed on a 2-year basis. Again, if so chosen, if we leave that option open for it to be maintained as field habitat by that mowing occurring late in the year.
Well, if what Chris had mentioned about that culvert is true, and we know it's a metal culvert, and we know when those were put in, and it most likely is failed.
Well,
Once we open that up, it might
Yeah.
not be.
It'll drain that right
yeah,
out.
so that's off of this site, and that's irrespective of this site, so I'm just,
right.
I'm trying to build in options while we have this before us that will hopefully, again, provide the option later on for that.
Mowing what area? I'm not clear, what, just along the fence, or?
No, mowing the wet
The wet-
meadow and the no cut, no disturbance area
Where would that
Outside
be?
the plan.
every 2 years to discourage woody vegetation from taking over, as well as the discussion about
Where on that map
invasives.
would that be, between the?
It's
The dark line
whole shaded
That whole
area
area.
here, and this is the no
It
cut,
is
no
now.
disturbance area.
Okay.
I don't understand why we'd wanna do that. Why not just let it go natural?
Because
Natural would be
going
great.
natural usually means that you're gonna get a 50% invasive
Yeah.
species,
Crickets.
because the reason it's a field and a wet meadow at this point in time is because man has been quote-unquote managing it. As soon as you stop managing it, the invasive species, which are all around here on the border from the other farmland that is no longer farmed, are gonna see an opportunity, and they're gonna move in there because they can outcompete the natives.
When you and I were behind the ballpark, looking to where they were going over into the town lands, I think that's why I was asking Chris how much of that was out there. I think we were walking through that, which would be behind the other side of the fence of the.
Well, I can tell you personally, from trying to put the trail in on the Brad Street property behind the community gardens,
Yeah.
that I can tell you just exactly what abandoned farmland looked like.
Yeah.
And I had to bring my rechargeable battery-powered hedge trimmers to cut the multi-floor rows to try and just get through where I'm hoping a trail can go.
Based on the work we did this weekend and the scars I have, I would
Yeah.
put the
Yeah.
Oh, that's stuff gross, it's
The
terrible.
sumac and the multi-floor rows
Oh,
and the
God,
burning
that's
bush
everything.
that we pulled out of the hedgerow next to the community gardens was phenomenal.
I think you got a great idea, I would
So-
Losing
definitely
battle.
consider not mowing.
Constantly.
Well, again, this is an option for management strategy, so therefore I would recommend just the establishment of posts, probably spaced 35 to 45 feet apart to delineate the no cut, no disturbance zone. That should then allow for any management strategy, and where they aren't talking about putting any fence involved with the ball field or the soccer field, that also will just mark the present location of those resource
Of
areas.
the repetitive mowing versus the
Right.
seasonal.
Right,
Seasonal
so the
mowing, yeah.
athletic field mowing will know where
Where they stop.
where those areas are. The only question that or the only discussion I haven't heard tonight is whether some type of management regimen is planned for the end of the expanded parking area to where the no cut, no disturbance area is. That isn't delineated on the plans of being utilized for any type of athletic
Or does it end there?
protocol. The swale ends here.
Okay.
The erosion control is shown going down there, but as far as I know, there's no proposal for any type of future use or any proposal for any athletic-related activity to go in that area, so.
Does the fence extend through that area?
The fence is gonna go to the corner of the property here. The requirement for fencing extends along this area.
Yeah.
I don't know if they plan to do fencing down here with the other abutter, that wasn't discussed.
My understanding, if I could just interject something here, since I'm a member of the Community Preservation Committee as well, is that the other abutter provided the land behind that to the town with the stipulation that some sort of fencing or screening be done there. So if it's not there, that would be an ideal time to extend that.
Debbie, do you know if the first purchase for 215 rear, if that also had a stipulation for fencing between the prior owner's property and the town's?
I don't remember that as part of the sale, but, you know.
It was extensively discussed during Community Preservation
Yeah.
Committee meetings,
It
and
was a-
it seems to me it was a requirement. I may be wrong as the technical aspect of it, but
Well,
they may have wanted,
We'll put in phraseology that if that needs to be implemented, that it can be implemented down to that portion. That actually extends outside the commission's jurisdictional area, so it's really not I mean, it's really not anything that we need to specifically say yay or nay on. So, now structurally, so what is shown is the positioning of a dugout, backstop, and another dugout over here. But specific details were not provided in regards to that. So I don't know that we really need to say anything. One dugout is within the 100-foot buffer zone.
Yeah, I see it, yeah.
If plans are gonna be developed in the future, maybe we should just request that there be communication
Okay.
with the Conservation Commission just to review the plans and see if there's any suggestions for, small impervious area compared to the field activity, I doubt that's going to result in any huge increase of stormwater. So I think as long as it's grassed around the dugout, it will be just as good as the dugouts that already exist down at Ayers Park. They don't show any signs of any stormwater issues relating to their continued usage in that area.
Chris, you got a question?
Yeah, about this swale, okay, which is gonna be located in this area somewhere. Is it gonna, how deep is it gonna be? How wide is it gonna be? And will it create, like, with weather that we've had this year, is it gonna create a pond that's gonna create a hydraulic dam and hold?
Well,
back?
it's a swale, so its length vastly exceeds its...
Where will it go to?
It doesn't go anywhere. It's really acting as a, let's see, the plans you sent me do not have those details on them.
It should be on the next page. Oh,
You only sent me 2 pages,
huh. That doesn't make sense.
so it must be on the first set of plans. That wasn't...
It should slow some of the water.
Yeah, it must have been on,
Hold
it's
on.
on the first
Hold
set
on.
of plans that I
Hold
sent
on.
over.
Hold on. Figure out which one of those.
I'm just thinking if it makes a pond.
No, it's
Yeah,
not making a pond.
very-
Scott.
It's not very
It's
big,
gonna
it's less
go
than a
somewhere.
foot deep.
Here you are, yeah.
Here we go, give me a second here.
It should slow the water across your property too.
Well, it will hold back water that would drain out of the property. you
So
know.
the water quality swale, the bottom of it is going to be 12 inches wide. It's then going to rise 10 inches on one side, 12 inches on the other. So that's probably going to totally result in maybe 4.5 to 5 feet in width. So basically it's a trench.
Yeah, right.
Think of it as an interception trench that is just going to stop direct sheet flow coming off the athletic fields and going into the no cut, no disturbance area and the wet meadow. So it's not, in one sense you could almost say it's just kind of a speed bump that'll hopefully catch the rolling balls before they go into tick heaven.
Yeah, there's that aspect.
So the final question I wanted to direct to the commission, just in holistic consideration of this project, is the Bradstreet Farm Conservation Area is located over here. And there's a farm road opening that came into, this parcel is owned by the town, and this parcel was originally designated as being for recreational fields, but as Ms. Egan expressed, we found out that there was going to be a massive amount of engineering involved. But anyway, it was requested that the commission allow temporary construction access of vehicles through the farm road opening onto this parcel when there was planned construction activity for there. I'm asking the commission if you can allow, on a temporary basis, the same thing again. If they wish to come in from the Bradstreet Farm, the area between the community gardens and where the storage containers are right now, just behind the storage containers, there's farm road access through here. It's anywhere from 18 to 20 feet minimum in width between any mature trees, so there's plenty of room to go through there. There would need to be some pruning in this open field area, which has gotten a little overgrown with some sumac. But the only work that would need to occur, and again, it's outside jurisdictional areas of the commission, would be a gapping of the stone wall that forms the boundary line.
I think there was one, wasn't there? When
No,
we walked in
no, there isn't a gap there.
Okay.
But I've marked out where the easiest, least amount of mature tree taking that would have to occur, and I was acquainting Ms. Ferraro with it when we were out there. But I just figured, again, holistically, instead of having a separate request for approval.
I mean, it'd be ideal to have that as a parking spot, but I don't think anybody's gonna want that.
Well, under the terms of use of the particular parcels right now, our conservation area, that is just, again, an existing dirt path through there, and upon completion, they can be requested to rough grade it, smooth it back out, and grass seed it to let it go back au natural. But I just wanted to bring that provision, and again, an option that I hope the commission would consider giving permission to, so that it would facilitate the creation of this field.
Are we gonna lump this all together?
Well, actually, we just, when that was asked before, we just issued a separate letter, because it's actually on different parcels.
Right.
But I just brought up the issue of access, because that is coming from conservation area and other town property. So no, it would be a separate letter, so I guess I'm kind of asking you for permission for
Alright,
two
so let's
things.
do the town
Consideration
thing
of an order, issuance of an order of conditions with typical conditions as well as the special conditions that we just discussed. Basically incorporating erosion control, stormwater management, invasive species control, vegetation management, and posts with signs for the no cut, no disturbance area.
And the previous owners, that's fine with you?
Who's the cutting, the every two bi-yearly cutting, let's say, who will be responsible for that, or is it gonna be one of these?
Town just did it a week ago.
That's gonna be left,
I mean the other part, the part that's.
It'll probably be subbed out, but
I don't know, but it's left as an option. It's not anything this permit will specifically require. It'll just be written into the conditions
That it's
so that.
it's allowable.
So that, yes,
Yeah.
yes, to leave that option open so somebody doesn't have to come back to the commission again to ask just that question.
Right.
We will put that in there.
you
I
have
have
a
a
question.
question.
If you so direct me.
You mentioned the removal of 12 to 18 inches of mowing to screen, and then you replace it on site. First of all, what's the extent of that? Is that going to be the entire site?
Or is that just the ball field? Is that just the baseball
Yeah,
field?
I think that's the,
Yep.
I mean, I assume that the town would like to have like an actual grass available where the soccer field is. So it would be this parcel here, so, you know, this piece here.
Okay.
And this is already a grass,
So that we
so that could stay.
I'm just thinking that the removal of the soils from one area, is it going to be conducted like in a rolling sort of fashion, so that you remove the soils, screen it, put it right back, or is it going to be conducted all at once, scrape it all off, screen it, and put it all back? Because I wonder if the mixing of the soils is going to impact drainage on the site at all. And I mean,
Didn't on the last part. It didn't on the last part.
It's
The
sandy,
soil's pretty
it's
good.
pretty sandy
It's a
loam.
sandy, yeah,
It's pretty thick, but it's not that thick black stuff, it's a sandy loam.
because
The grass is right up with it.
there's a portion, you know, pretty close to some pretty wet areas that I would imagine had higher amount of clay. I don't know, I'm not a soil scientist.
Well, if they started it and there was a high amount of clay, then they'd have to buy some additional material to mix in with it.
Probably
But they didn't have to do it all
Probably
that.
isn't clay out there if
Yeah.
he's seen a change in the vegetative plant community that appears to be in response to drainage maintenance. If it was clay, if there was a lens of clay out there, it would just be wet, period, and it would have been wet.
That's not, yeah, that's not a clay.
Okay. Just, those were-
So I don't know how to present this as a,
Well, why don't we first have a motion in regards to a consideration issuance of the order of conditions as, with special conditions as we discussed, which includes the fencing and that various.
All the items, fencing,
The ability to do the mowing every.
mowing, the temporary mowing, the regular mowing, the fencing, the invasive species, and an access, temporary access through other town property.
Is he gonna do that under one?
So that's.
No, he's gonna do that,
separate.
I think he's gonna do that
Okay.
separate. I got
Do I
the-
hear such a motion for the ball field part?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I abstain. I'm an outsourcer, and about it.
Oh, I'm sorry, yep. And then the next thing is,
And then a request for a motion to issue approval for construction vehicle access to use the existing farm road pathway corridor across the conservation, Brad Street Farm Conservation Area.
I guess I have a question, does that need to have a butter notification?
we are the...
We're all the butters.
we're all the butters.
Well,
Not
excuse
all
me,
of
the
butters
cat-
of
the
Brad
cat-
Street.
Would Brad Street, the farm itself, be considered
Yes.
on a butter? Or is it, or do we cover
Well, again-
our land?
Well, let's
This
not
is
get hung
not,
up
this
on
is
that.
not an application under the Wetlands Protection Act because
Yeah.
nothing is being proposed to be removed, filled, dredged, or altered.
You're outside of
It's
the,
pre-existing,
you're
yeah,
outside of the,
it's outside,
Yeah.
outside of 100-foot buffer zones, it's just, it's an old farm road
Would that be the
access.
path that we would want to have to get us over there too in the long run? Remember
That's
we
why I
talked
just
about-
mentioned it was gonna give it
Weren't we
skulls.
hoping to have a path that would take us from this field?
We had a totally different conversation that had absolutely nothing to do with this particular area, but you are right, it could potentially.
Be a path over there
Yeah,
for the rest of our trail.
People have walked through there.
Okay, no, I'm just not trying to
Yeah,
understand.
but no, this wasn't anything that was contemplated.
Okay,
This
thank
is
you.
town-owned land, right?
Right.
It's all
Town-owned
about-
land.
I'd be interested in the town administrative manager's opinion, how she feels about that.
We were planning, when we were working on the design of potential ball fields on the active recreation piece, we were gonna come in this way, and at the time we got the permission from the Concom to do that. So there's the town-owned land that's under the selectmen on the Brad Street property, and then the
Thank you.
Concom piece. So, right now with the construction of Pine Grove School, maybe we'll be able to come in through Pine Grove, but we're not sure, so we just wanted to have a backup plan
Let's
to
cross that fence when we come.
to get that construction equipment to excavate and build the ball fields. If we have a
I'd
problem,
rather
And this was
not-
something that was approved, it was approved before, just for a different contemplated project.
I'd rather have the trucks going that way than ruining Brad Street's road, which got quite a bit of stuff done to it last year. Yeah. All right, so I hear such a motion for the
Letter
Branch.
of approval to the selectmen to allow construction vehicle access
Transportation.
crossing
crossing.
the existing old farm crossing of the conservation area.
So move.
Okay, thank you. Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Is there a name for that field? Is that the Gwynn Field or?
No,
is it
it's-
going to be,
Yes, we
It's
had
gonna
a-
be, what, the Henley
I
Field?
gave it to, yes, it's the
Henley
Henley,
Field,
'cause that
yeah.
was my grandfather.
Okay,
Yeah,
I knew there was
he's the guy
a,
that-
Henley,
Field.
yes, Henley
Yeah.
Fields.
it's currently
I gave
the
it to,
the Veterans Field.
Timmy Sulfo.
So this was the extension to that. The other part is the Veterans Field.
Howard.
how is?
Henley Field, yeah, he's the only guy that ever really worked it, so it should be named after him.
Yes, he used to, down at the end of the field there, near where you go into
Yeah.
Bradstreet's, Johnny Bradstreet used to live there. And he took care of the place before Doris and George had it. And he used to ride his wagons, his horses, in through to meet my grandfather, because he helped him
Yeah.
with the gardens.
Yeah.
But that's all covered in now, it's awful mess,
Yeah.
terrible down there.
Well, hopefully.
Now, it's also wet on the other side of that road. Down
Chris,
in
where does that,
Todd's.
where does that water when it goes underneath?
What
Is that
happens,
drained?
my dad and I years ago went through and we actually brushed that whole wooded area on that side, took all the prickers and stuff, it was back in
So it stays on your side
94.
and goes that way?
And it stayed behind Don Thurston's and behind the historic. It used to pond up if it rained real hard out in that wooded area behind Don's place, and then freeze in the winter. I skated on it when I was a kid. But it's because, so we kind of mucked out, there was a swale going to that culvert, but the culvert, we looked in the culvert with flashlights, it's all caved in. So it doesn't move, out of there, it doesn't go onto Bradstreet's Lane and into that other field and under 1A. It just
Because
sits
Todd's property in the last 15 years got wet on that side.
Right,
Yeah.
because it's all just sitting there. It's not draining under the road, under 1A.
All right, we'll mention something to highway with all their extra time.
Doris and George, I thought, had a new culvert thing.
Well, that was eons ago, it was way back.
Didn't they? Not too long ago, I thought, because they had it paved, the road paved.
No, he didn't.
I think the only culvert that we saw was an old metal,
Yeah, old 4 minutes, built this
about
big.
1/3 of the way down.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it.
We skip the next item go to
Oh,
junk.
no, please read that.
Let's try to continue it.
Continued request.
Yep, please.
This is the APM item, is a continued request to amend the order of conditions, DEP number 63-0625 on land off Daniels Road, map 9, parcel lot 23, Tompkins DeJardis Trust, Bruce Tompkins trustee. They request to amend the proposed construction of duplex buildings with associated roadways, driveways, utilities, stormwater facilities, and grading possibly within a 100-foot buffer zone bordering vegetated wetlands. Now, read this.
Right. So the backdrop is, we received a communication today from Mr. DeCoulis. I reached out to Mr. DeCoulis, I got a communication from him on another matter. I reached out to Mr. DeCoulis because the last email we had received indicated that at the end of last week, we were gonna receive materials in response to the peer reviewers, so.
So what we got
So
here,
he turned in via electronic submission today, items that he said were in response to Horsley and Witten's review, and asked me to forward those to Horsley and Witten. I replied back to him that it still was going to recommend a continuance, consideration of a continuance by the commission tonight, because of course no one has had a chance to even look at those submittals. So he, 3 hours before the meeting, he sent in an email with this request for continuance.
dear Conservation Commission members, kindly continue the request to amend the order of conditions DEP 63-0625 to your next meeting on December 4th, 2018, as we have submitted responses to Horsley Witten for review. John DeCoulis.
And Horsley Witten also communicated with me today that they believe they could have their review, have a review prior to that meeting, so that we might be able to possibly take some action depending upon the completeness of what he's responding.
Motion to continue?
We'd love that.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. It is continued.
The next item is 805, which is an informal discussion, concept plan for land off Kathleen Circle, map 7, lot 17, John Coughlin, trustee, Gateway 2 Trust, 1997. I thought I saw John. Yep.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Nancy McCann. I represent the Gateway 2 Realty Trust. John Coughlin is also here this evening. And we wanted to speak with you tonight, as it said informally, on your agenda regarding a proposed zoning change that is being presented and has been presented to the selectmen and is going to be heard by the planning board tomorrow night regarding a rezoning of a portion of the property that the Coughlins, the Gateway 2 Realty Trust, purchased at the beginning of this year. And part of that proposal involves a donation of open space to the town, and presumably to the Conservation Commission for open space on behalf of the town. And so we wanted to talk to you about that tonight, get your input on it and see if it's something that the commission would be interested in having us pursue. We've had a number of different staff meetings over the last 6 months or so, and Brent has been involved in a few of those. The Coughlins purchased 33 acres from Bruce Ashley, again, February of this year. And part of that property, the property is located between Kathleen Circle and Forest Ridge Road being an industrial subdivision that comes directly off of Route 1. And the 33 acres sits in between Forest Ridge Road and Kathleen Circle. And what is being proposed is a rezoning of 9.7 acres, which is shown here, from outlying district to the Business Light Industrial District, which is the same district as the Forest Ridge Road, so that the commercial industrial development on Forest Ridge Road could be further developed into the 9.7 acres that's proposed for rezoning. The balance of the 33 acres, it's about 23.9 acres, is being proposed to be donated to the town for open space. And that's what you see in the lighter color as Lot 1 on the plan that we've submitted to you. It's a uniquely situated piece for open space because, as you know, the town through the Conservation Commission actually owns parcel to the north and parcel to the south of this piece. So this 24 acres would provide a connection between the two open space parcels that you already hold, the one to the north being the Hunsley Hill piece. The open space would also provide a border and a buffer for the residential homes along Kathleen Circle. The width here is about 200 feet. So there's some benefit there. So that's the proposal that we've submitted to the Board of Selectmen, and they heard it last week and forwarded it on to the Planning Board for hearing, is a request to amend the zoning map to rezone Lot 2, which is the darker crosshatched area, from the outlying district to the Business Light Industrial District. And as part of that, there would be the donation of Lot 1, the 24 acres, to the town for open space.
Where's this piece of conservation land down here? Can that be described a little bit? I don't know anything about that.
I'm sorry, you.
So the piece, yeah, right down in there. So where does that kind of go?
Well, it doesn't really go anywhere. It has a 30 to 40 foot width access corridor left on Ice Pond Drive that can get in there. Part of that we'll have to deal with in the future because an abutter has decided to take over by adverse possession and plant rhododendrons and turf grass, but that's, you know, good fences don't make good neighbors, or the lack of fences don't make good neighbors, whatever, I don't know. Anyway, so there really hasn't been public access, but it's also very wet too.
Yeah.
You can kind of see a little, it's all forested wetlands that extends on up into that area, and actually the wetland system extends up. One thing that hasn't been talked about tonight that does need to be fully recognized is there would be the need for an access corridor for a water line to go through here. So I'm not sure what the requirements are for the width of that type of access easement to allow maintenance, but I would assume it probably isn't anything that exceeds 20 feet.
No, it's typically 20 feet.
Yeah,
And
okay.
that, the exact location of that has not been determined yet, but we're very close to being able to determine that. But what we would include as part of the dedication or the donation would be a reservation of a 20-foot wide easement for installation and maintenance of a water line. That it would not be for vehicular access or anything like that.
I was going to say, the discussion was that it actually would strictly prohibit
Correct.
it being converted into any type of vehicle or motorized access.
That's correct.
So where would your vehicle access be to that property?
It interfaces with, I think this is Capco Crane,
Yeah.
I think. And I believe the conceptual plans showed a tie-in with the access road that comes down off of Forest Ridge Drive that dead ends down here where the stormwater basin is. Is
So
that?
you're asking the access into the area being rezoned?
Right.
Yeah.
This is a conceptual
Ah, there it is.
plan of what,
Upside down.
there we go. It's much better
You
now.
can still get
I say,
there.
well, you know, I was
You
just
can
trying
still
to
get
keep,
there. It's just-
trying to keep you on your toes, switching the perspective.
So yeah, so here's Capco Crane.
So this is for Route 1, Forest Ridge comes in, this is the existing access road, and these buildings are existing. So it would come off of this access road off of Forest Ridge. There would be no access from Kathleen Circle, and it would just come in here. Probably, we're showing two buildings, might be one.
Right, either.
Where's the detention pond down off of that driveway?
It's down on this.
It is actually right here, and it's actually shown.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's the size of what, one football field or two, John?
2 football.
Two
fields.
football fields.
And it's big.
It's big.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been doing its work lately too.
Yeah. Now, it should also be noted that Mr. Coughlin has a CR, which the town of Raleigh holds, for a lot of the area down in here.
Yeah.
So you could make an argument that there's a lot of connectivity proposed here, as well as, I'll be very honest, because of other responsibilities and the monsoon season we're in. I haven't had an opportunity to exercise the permission I've been given to be able to look at this, but I anticipate it's going to be wooded, nice undisturbed forest.
It's
It's
steep.
done-
Forested slope, and I,
Don't put that up yet.
Don't put this one up yet. This is an area which does show a lot of the wooded.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I have been given permission to
Yeah.
recon the property, which I look forward to.
Now, this cannot this cannot happen unless the town changes the zoning.
That's correct. This
So we
would
got
be-
so many other
Kept
things
going.
going on here.
Yeah, it all fits together, and it fits together in a rather quick time frame. The special town meeting
You
is
haven't been in
anticipated for...
Raleigh very long, have you?
Well, special town meeting, I'm told, is perhaps second or third week of January. Which this would be on the warrant, or the warrant for that. Planning board hearing is tomorrow night, so it could happen sooner rather than later. Of course, it's
Go
town
ahead,
meeting.
Chris.
The water access ties that it anticipates tying into Kathleen Circle, is
Yes,
that correct? Which provides a looping facility?
correct.
Now, whose property is that going through?
It hasn't been it hasn't been specifically laid out yet, but there are a couple of different lots. There is an easement already that was shown on the Kathleen Circle subdivision plan, and most likely it would go through that easement on 20, I think it's 28.
Is that a private parcel, privately owned?
Yes, we've had a neighborhood meeting, and again, the planning board meeting will take place tomorrow night. The water line connection is not a requirement of the zoning change. That came out during discussions with town staff, and we've been talking about the rezoning proposal as a benefit to the town. The fire department is very much in favor of that loop. The water department very much in favor of the loop. It's extremely expensive for the town to provide that looping, that they've wanted for years. And now there is a developer here, John Coughlin, who would be willing to do that as part of the development, not necessarily part of the zone change. John could do the industrial development here without the water loop, but it's a benefit, and it's something that we've discussed as being something that he'd be willing to do. So as far as the donation of the open space, how the water line affects that is simply a reservation of a 20-foot easement.
Does the town have any parcels that front on Kathleen Circle between these? Are all of those private?
Yes, actually, there is again, a small access to this open space area, but it's mostly all forested wetlands.
It's, yes.
Two houses down from you,
down,
or at least one house down from you, it's then between, I think, those two residences.
Yeah.
But it goes
It
right into
doesn't-
forested wetlands, so it's never
It goes into
been
this piece.
something we could contemplate there being public access trail, and that was never.
No, I'm not
Because
talking about the public access, I'm talking about the water loop. The water.
Well,
That's.
it's town conservation land, so I doubt very much
I think there
that-
probably wouldn't be, and also we'd then be dealing again with the wetlands area there,
Yeah,
whereas I think
wetlands issues.
we won't be into the wetland issue if we put the water line in the general area of where we've been talking about it.
There's a drainage easement, is my understanding, in looking at the Kathleen Circle plans, that there's a drainage easement that was what actually created
There's a
the
drain, and there's
initial.
a drain pipe there,
Yeah.
which seems like a logical location for it to be.
This would add about another third to the land in Hunsley Hills, right? Is what,
I
100
haven't
acres?
actually crunched the acreage.
I think there's
I
100 plus acres
apologize.
in Hunsley, so you.
There's, Hunsley is pretty big.
So, so we could put additional trails into this area as life goes on. Potentially, I'm not saying.
Until
just
I recon
You
it
don't-
and
you're not
find
sure.
out how steep the slopes are on the reserve talking about trails.
But zip lines.
That's an idea. No, it's very steep.
Yeah, there's always, there's
to the
already
north
some
of,
high-powered
Quincy.
transmission lines up there, just as long as you got a good insulator on your
extremely
little
steep up.
saddle. You can-
Is there any questions from the audience on this while we're? Okay. Back to you.
Well, here again, this was informative. This was to actually provide some substance to the zoning change, which we're going to look at a little later on, as well as, Mr. Coughlin has been well, in my experience for the 14 years here in the town of Raleigh, he's been a very responsive developer, business owner, and has, to my recollections and all my dealings, has always sought to put forth both environmental benefits to his project as well as being very forthcoming and willing to have discussions about aspects like this. I believe he probably recognizes the fact that the surrounding landscape in the town of Raleigh contributes to the overall well-being and the desirability of many firms and folks to become residents or workers here in the town. So this would.
You could put that in his literature.
So what would be say this does get passed by the zoning board, right? So what's the next step that involves us?
Well, we are more than likely going to have to entertain some permitting in regards to the establishment of the buildings there, because the 100-foot buffer zone, I believe it extends into at least one side, I think, the southern side of the complex. But overall, we should have some discussions in regards to, again, any acquisition of open space. We've been advised to make sure that it's properly described, that we have rods or bounds or drill holes that we're able to identify, and that we obtain a surveyed plan that gives us proper mets and bounds description of the property, because you can only protect what you're able to exactly map out and know where it is. So in that regards, as well as I think,
Value.
well, the past history of this parcel too also had the folks on Kathleen Circle. Again, this was before my time, but apparently Mr. Ashley had entertained an agreement with a developer for a proposed 40B on that property. You kind of wonder, have never seen what was proposed for this property, but again, the topography, the steep slopes and everything else, and then the interplay of the forested wetlands on the part of it that is not steeply sloped, make me wonder what in the world was proposed for there, but it was not receptive and responsive to the needs of the community or the neighborhood, I guess is the best way to put it.
No, the neighborhood was, they were very upset about that because it had access coming in off of Kathleen. And again, we had a neighborhood meeting 2 weeks ago, and I think this was well received there at that meeting by providing a buffer of open space and really prohibiting any access in the future coming through.
So the conserved open space in this manner is actually addressing some neighborhood needs, some community needs, as well as some an environmental component, because we are always looking for connectivity to the preserved parcels.
And the rezoned section, the 9.7 acres being rezoned, is proposed to be rezoned for business light industrial, a use that's going to bring some tax revenue into the town, and that's important too. Because right now, that piece is zoned outlying district, so it's residential. And that's not the highest and best use of that piece of property, given its situation, proximity to Route 1, the access to Route 1 that we can give it, and the industrial development that is immediately adjoining the parcel. The plan that we did provide to you is a surveyed plan. It's got the meets and bounds on it. And certainly, you know, iron rods and things like that can be provided at appropriate locations. But really what we're interested in tonight is making you aware of this and to get your feedback as to whether this is a parcel you would like to have donated to the Conservation Commission for Open Space.
It makes a very good amount of sense. It connects two of our existing parcels. It seems like it's
As much as we can see right here, I don't see any problems with it. Kind of curious as to what's gonna happen tomorrow night. I might go see what the town is enough or not.
I'm gonna attend the planning board meeting tomorrow night.
Well, this isn't, I don't think this is a controversial
No.
zoning piece. There's at least three other pieces of zoning that may have some controversy associated with them, so. Looks like a slam dunk to me.
So, yeah, so I gather that the feeling here is very optimistic on it.
So, yeah, is the consensus of the commission that you support and look
Everything
look
I've seen and
forward to
heard at this
working?
point, especially dealing with Mr. Coughlin because of his past reputation and what he's done in the past, I think it's all plus connected, so.
Would it be appropriate for you to take a motion or make a motion to support moving forward with that donation? Obviously, it would.
Certainly can. I don't, but see, we're firing at a blank target, so I really don't know what to aim at. If you had, this was the building, and this is the road, and this is how wide it's gonna be, this is the water pressure, and this is what it's gonna cost the town, not cost the town, that'd be one thing, but I mean, it's kinda like, you know.
Well, this is, what we're just talking about is the donation parcel. And the development itself, should the zone change go through at town meeting, then we would still have to go to Board of Appeals for a special permit, site plan approval. The town meeting would not be approving this concept plan. It would be approving the rezoning of the 9.7 acres to allow us to proceed forward with
Exactly.
Board of Appeals and Planning Board.
Yes, I
But
don't know if
part
we
of-
could
but-
actually
what,
put a name on anything that we don't know.
I think it's
Well,
a tiny bit preliminary to put a name on it.
I think you could just say that in regards to the potential donation of the identified open space on this conservation, on this preliminary conceptual plan, that the commission doesn't have any expressed concerns or is in general support.
I mean, will we
That
be-
does- that doesn't
I mean, we
commit you
would
to
be in
anything.
favor of being able to have that land be part of our.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's what we can make a statement about, is
Right.
that we would be in favor of receiving that land as a donation as part of our open space.
I think that would be helpful, because I think procedurally what's going to happen is we'll have the planning board hearing tomorrow night, and then between that and town meeting, we'll be working with town council and with the selectmen, because what the selectmen will want to have happen is, and because it's our proposal, we will actually have the deed for the open space drafted, signed, and held in escrow by town council, so that the town knows that when the zone change happens and Attorney General approves the zone change, the deed is there, that's all part and parcel.
Well, I don't think it's, people don't trust each other, it's what, get everybody in this town to agree on one thing.
Well, we like to make sure that everybody understands
We've
that.
let Mr. Coughlin go for months without having to hold any deed or anything like that, that's never bothered us, so, but yes, we could send a letter that we
Yeah,
are in favor of.
I think that
this.
requirement is a little different, it's because of the zoning change, I think, so I think
Yeah.
that requirement comes from the planning board, but again, I think the
Well,
commission's only
yes.
being asked to indicate if they have positive
Right.
feelings and would be receptive to consideration of that open space.
So you would just write a letter saying that?
I don't know if I'd write a letter, because if I'm gonna be at the meeting tomorrow night,
Or
I
you
can
could-
speak to it specifically.
So what do we gotta say tonight? That's what I'm trying to get.
We are
What
in
do we
agreement.
say?
I don't, yeah.
That we are in agreement that the Conservation Committee supports acquisition of that land as open space,
No, yeah.
or receiving that land as part of it. If that requires a motion, I'll move that for the motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Could you just remind me, please, what's the total acreage of the dark green?
The dark green is
33.
23.9.
23.9, so it's like 2.5 to 1.
Yes, and 9.7. It's about a 33-acre parcel, and it's about 2/3, 1/3.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm sorry now, who moved and seconded it, was
Howard
what?
moved, I
So
seconded.
Howard moved, okay. Dan seconded, thank you.
And I saw on your agenda, you're going to be discussing the zoning changes later this evening. Is that something that it would be appropriate for us to stick around and answer any
There's
questions?
the only
Sure.
thing we had to do, you're welcome, it's open meeting,
Mhm.
is how it does to the wetland stormwater management.
Okay.
As always, gentlemen, ladies, thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And actually, we can segue right to that, because I haven't gotten any feedback in regards to
Okay.
413, so there's no reason why we can't. Talk about it.
Excuse me, Brett, if I did, we're still on for that 1 o'clock meeting tomorrow up at 414 to look at the riprap.
As long as I don't have to get on the ark with all the animals, yep.
You may.
Stop raining.
See you later, have a good
Yeah.
evening.
Good night. Yeah.
The other ones that need to do,
So I did pass out.
What's 413? What's 413?
Well, 413 is, we issued an enforcement order almost a month ago, and I've gotten absolutely no communication.
Which one is
or
that?
response.
Oh, that
That's the one right across from, Dodge Reservation, right on the corner of Weathersfield Street there.
I went down there the next day and saw, yeah, but, and he's never, well, you and I had to go down for the beavers. And you haven't heard anything?
No,
Check the mats out.
Next step will be.
That was taken out like the same day we had the meeting, or the
Yeah.
day before the meeting.
There's grass growing.
Should we see him in December?
Well, I don't know, I've gotta reach out and find out what's going on, because this is so unusual, and I just honestly.
I never thought that,
I've been
yeah.
so busy, I haven't had. I wrote him an email today, I'm assuming he's getting my emails, I get no indications of them being bounced back. But it's so unusual, especially after a person's come to the meeting and you've gone over, you need to do this, we want you to do that. It's so unusual then not to have anything occur,
All right.
nothing.
You try to contact him, if not, why don't we invite him for?
Well, I'm going to, but in order for me to be able to have any type of discussion with you, I had to put it on the agenda. But there may be a problem in communications, or there may be something else going on that we just don't know about that is
Certainly, I'm
interceded.
surprised at that myself.
So anyway, so I passed out distributed materials to you. You've got some colored paper clips there with the proposal. And this was intended mostly just to acquaint you with these items that were occurring. And this one, I think, is the only one that has a direct tie-in with any type of implications in regards to the commission considering, but and unfortunately, since I'm not so well versed in zoning, I'm gonna have a hard time. Well, actually, I won't be able to answer any questions. I'm gonna have to refer you that I would either make inquiries to the planning board itself or on your behalf, or encourage you to come to the planning board meeting tomorrow night. Because I will be the first to admit that I'm not 100% sure of all that's going on here, but I understand these are overlay districts that they are intending to have a discussion on and have done outreach to the abutters and property owners in the areas possibly affected by this. One of these, the area that I have on the screen right now, you'll recognize that it has Saeed Abu Zara's self-storage facility located on it, as well as a couple of adjoining parcels, Muddy Creek right across the way there. Also Mr. Carpeno's property, and then where Mr. Dunn Landscaping just constructed his commercial building are included in there. I believe these parcels here are all Abu Zara Family Trust or different names of different members of his family.
And that's all well zone 2, isn't it?
It's all zone 2, yeah.
It's all light industrial already, with a possible exception of that lot 4-24 up in your right hand. You know, I think that's a private residence. But,
Yes, it's a residence next to Muddy Creek. As I said, it was just to bring this information, so if you did have interest or...
We've had all of those lots before us at one point or another in the last few years, with the exception of that.
Maybe it's the exception of
4-24.
424,
Right.
and,
So
all the other ones have come before
I
us.
think any wetland issues have been covered adequately by us.
And then,
We'll
of
know
course,
more after tomorrow.
and then, of course, you just had an explanation as to the proposed zoning change initiated for Mr. Coughlin's consideration. And, you know, I'm afraid I really don't quite understand. I believe what I have displayed on the screen here, the northern aspect of Route 1. Trying to remember their name, but this has been agricultural farm property.
Right.
Woodson.
Well, yes, but that's not the family
Well,
name. The family
it's
name
that-
begins with M or something, I think, doesn't it?
Well, it's the same family that son-in-law of
It's the one that Kelquist was here.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Plus, where on the other side of this, of Route 1 was the proposed solar facility?
The proposed solar facility,
right across
right here,
There.
right
but
there.
that big one.
That parcel, except only located in this,
Yep.
this corner of it.
Yeah.
Well, that parcel runs behind a lot of private homes and properties on Weathersfield Street. And-
Yes,
and,
yeah, comes down here.
I would hate to see the.
Got a lot of our conservation land that it abuts too, because I think the Mill
Yes.
River,
Yeah.
Mill River
Oh,
is the
that's right.
boundary there, and some of its boundary may even transition into Batchelder Brook.
It does.
Because I think the Mill River continues on in that direction, and I think this is Batchelder Brook.
Yep. There was a proposal maybe 25 years ago to rezone this, and people on Weathersfield Street, both on my end and on the east side, were dead set against it. And the proposal got to the floor of town meeting, and I got up to speak against it, and they withdrew it. I still don't like the idea of rezoning this and filling all that area with industrial business. It has a lot to do with the character of the town, and I hate to, there've been proposals to put various kinds of businesses along that in the past, and they've all failed because, with the exception of the winery, because that was consistent with the prior usage. It just is gonna change the whole character of the town if we allow that to be industrialized.
That's still, the building requirements are no less for industrial than they are for residential. And it's really been slow developing residential there because that land is just.
That is not
Yeah, there's a lot of forested wetlands on that.
But what the killer has been is that it has to be consistent with prior usage. And that's one of the requirements of that zoning. And that's what has kept all this from being developed so far. And personally, I'd hate to see it change, but.
So, I'm trying to refresh my memory, between Weathersfield and Central, on one there, is there any commercial?
Yes.
Are
You
there
have the
restaurants,
fence
are there
company,
little
yeah.
restaurants there?
You have the
or-
two little restaurants, you have the fence company,
And the fence company,
and then there's a couple of small houses out there.
yeah.
The winery, and you've
Yeah,
got the
So
pavement.
Agawam Fence is
Yeah.
on that parcel.
Yeah.
The winery, I think, is actually this, is it this parcel?
It's gotta be that one
Right
right there, it's gotta be around the corner.
Right,
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
there.
That one right there, yeah.
And then the one restaurant,
Samaj.
Samaj, is there, Olives
Olives
is
there.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, right across the street was your
Fence,
fence
and then there's a
place,
sign place, where's the sign
Yeah, there's a
place?
sign.
Is this
Yeah,
the
the
sign
cheese
place right
company,
here?
yeah.
Yeah, the old cheese company, I think that's
Auction
that parcel
house.
right there.
Yeah,
Doug's signs.
Yes.
but I mean, those are postage stamp size.
And plus the paving operation further up,
Oh,
is
yeah,
right
Action.
on the Mill River.
Yeah, that small
Drain,
parcel,
right.
yeah.
Action paving.
Yeah, that's always been
No,
a
when
business
we
that
looked
was
at the town, it was a
shoehorned
cottage.
into a bad spot, yeah.
We tried to stop that, and there was a small summer camp on where that paving place is.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's now the house, the property owner's house, but the Conservation Commission voted not to permit the change, and they took us to court, and the court said that it would have been a taking under the law, so they were allowed to do.
Oh, that it didn't have any use as just a cottage, it had to be turned into a paving company?
Well,
That's a unique interpretation.
that wasn't part of the, the usage, future usage wasn't part of the understanding. The court sued us whether it was a taking or not, and they said we couldn't take it.
Excuse me, now you people are here for just
Listen.
Learning.
Oh, good.
Learning,
Yeah,
so.
great.
Who said we had to be here?
Well, it's more fun than staying at home and watching the things on television.
I could
Watching
argue
California
with you.
burn.
I could argue.
My wife would say otherwise.
All right,
Uh,
okay, yeah, the next thing, have we gone through the,
I think
No,
so.
one more.
Like I said, I'm not.
yeah, but what the,
This one.
Where's this one, yeah?
what's that, which one is that?
Yeah,
Which-
put that on the
what's-
screen right
That's,
now.
that's south of Weathersfield Street on Route 1. I think those
Yeah.
are the three The three, there are three
Oh, yeah.
existing.
Three residences,
Four
aren't they?
existing, one, two.
Yeah, we just did something
Oh.
across the street in the steel company there.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are 4 lots there.
yeah, and they've all got existing residential
Yes.
dwellings on them.
Yeah,
And they
Yeah.
So why would you change that?
I don't know.
If somebody wants to change it,
Well, they
Obviously,
abut Bay
yeah.
State Glass if they were
Yeah.
all acquired, and these are the 3 pieces that Bay State sold off to access Weathersfield.
Right, but
Street
these
and
are,
the 3
these are
homes.
residential properties now, those three that are,
Yeah, they
that are
are.
not shaded, they're residential properties.
Well, maybe the,
I know,
no.
but I'm not sure.
This is not, because this goes up to
Yeah.
the corner, the big
Yeah.
wet corner where they were talking about putting a
What?
fire station at one point.
Right. Yeah, but it was too wet even for that.
Right, that whole area is pretty wet. But once you
Anyway.
get beyond that, I think there are 3 house lots.
Well, there are.
Came
Yeah.
off a common
Just-
driveway.
Yeah.
I don't
Off of
know.
Weathersfield.
Where do they go on the other end?
There's a common driveway.
The
to
common,
Weathersfield.
common driveway right across from Alexander Arthur's,
Yeah,
With
horse stables.
Right.
Yeah.
That common
Okay.
driveway goes back and crosses the stream and goes up to those 3 dwellings.
doesn't, yeah. But doesn't the town own some land up there too?
No,
No.
no. No, you
Not up that
have to
drive.
move closer to Turner's place, and then we have that parcel that
Right.
Sandy
Sandy
Patrick and
gave us,
Ipswich Bay Glass gave us, where the stockade gate is. That's conservation land.
Right. Anyway, I don't see why they're doing this.
I don't either.
Don't know.
Is it a single person proposing this? Is
I-
this proposing all this at once or what?
What?
I don't know.
I just heard about it the other
Where the
day.
idea comes from.
I apologize, it's something, I guess, that came out of the zoning review
The only,
committee.
the only thing I can see is that there are businesses on this side, so they're
Yeah.
just saying, well, let's have businesses on both sides. If that is, someone just thinks the more businesses we have, the more.
This
tax
business
rate.
here, he just merely parks the trucks there where the steel is delivered,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, they're not like businesses that you go stop at, they're not even signs.
Right, yeah, it doesn't have a retail component, it's
Yeah.
just a yard.
It's like the
Storage.
Avis,
Yeah.
you know, just,
I came out of Weathersfield Street last night, which is over here,
yeah.
Yeah,
turned up here.
yeah,
This slopes downward to about here,
Yeah.
and then it rises to about here.
right.
And I turned the corner here, there was nobody coming, I had my high beams on, and a car came over this hill, and I put my high beams down, and 30 feet in front of me, a deer went whipping across there,
What do you hit today?
and up that lane, and I expected a herd to follow it, but nothing happened. It's scary stuff.
Did you want it okay on that?
That's just informative.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
It's just informative, we probably won't have to really think about it until we get into budgeting in spring.
Oh.
They just send it out ahead of time because they don't know how different communities start doing some of their budgeting.
All right, now what about discuss the amendments to the wetland protection bylaw for town meeting to address the process of a,
did we forget the OSRD application for Fox Hollow?
Oh, yeah, we did, we went over that, didn't we? Yeah, I wanted to just, Mr. Nixon's Taylor Lane LLC
Yeah.
proposal.
It's right underneath the
Let
plan.
me close some of these things here.
It's been several years since I've seen a fox on there.
not many of them left anymore.
Maybe I gotta shrink this back up again.
Coyote Drive probably wouldn't sound as good as Fox Hollow.
So I don't know, how does that, so,
More current,
Yeah.
spots I saw.
so this has been adjusted a little bit with the further inclusion of a parcel down here in this small little cul-de-sac area because forested wetlands kind of surround it. So that's kind of the major reconfiguration.
He took out some of the houses in the beginning?
Which, didn't you
Yeah,
issue with the
well,
river?
yeah, well, I don't think he had added any more. This pretty much starts where the Moran farmhouse is existing, is where those few lots are. I think this one was always in the mix. But when they got down here, they're having some type of discussion with the planning board that the open space residential zoning might allow them to have like duplex or townhouses.
They've increased the number of homes through the townhouse mechanism by a fairly substantial amount from what they originally were talking about when they came in here.
Well, they never were really talking about townhouses.
Yeah, they
but
were.
this-
Right, single families.
It was all single families.
Yeah.
I even had a conversation with Rob Nixon, and I said, you know, have you considered putting duplexes in there? And he said, no, we don't want to do that. Quite emphatically.
Well,
Now, here they
now
come.
apparently that's changed with, well, and again, I believe they're talking about, again, further acquisition of this parcel in order to do that.
And he still has the access road going into the golf course project, I see.
Well,
Not the golf course, but the
no.
land between that and the
Golf course.
I mean, the Herrick property
It's way up there.
is over
Up there.
here, I think, which I think is why that is there. But then this outlet was put in, and I was present when the planning board members started asking, well, why isn't there an outlet down here? And he says, well, because we went and there's wetlands all surrounding. So even though you'd think it would make sense to have an outlet down here, it didn't because there was wetland resource areas. And so you had to go in this direction so that you wouldn't be doing a crossing if you wanted to further tie in. So that's kind of going roughly towards the golf course,
It
but
is.
it still isn't. It still isn't there
Definitely.
because Mr. Tompkins owns all that acreage.
Well, that extra little blurb trapezoid down the bottom, that's a Tompkins property, right?
Yep, he
Yeah.
owns everything around it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what he wants to develop, all that land,
Yeah.
where he took out all the trees.
So there's still a substantial open space component that really hasn't changed, with the exception of there's the possibility of open space on the other side there. And I'm not sure if there's some kind of plan for that to possibly link in and be other.
So all that green stuff is the stuff that they were gonna give to us?
Yes, that's what the discussions have been. And the one caveat that they've discovered is that the planning board's OSRD regulations call for 50% upland or non-Wetlands Protection Act resource area, and then 50% can be Wetlands Protection Act resource area. Well, that includes riverfront. And so they are still looking for the commission to be supportive, because what that did was that impacted this area here on this parcel that directly abuts the Dodge Reservation, because there's relatively small freshwater wetlands and floodplain associated with Taylor Brook in that area.
Probably not small.
But the 200-foot riverfront area comes a substantial distance into high, dry terrain over there. So they're going to be asking the planning board to waive that strict 50% dry, 50% wetland resource area, because they have, I think, 39% non-wetland resource area dry, and then whatever, 39, that's 100. So they've got a little bit more wetland resource area, but
So where are they showing the duplexes on this? Just that little cul-de-sac?
you know,
Or is it hard to say?
I apologize. I think the conversation focused on that
Those
area
four,
there.
putting in like two duplex.
Now, is this gonna be low income,
Sounds like they've
No.
increased it by 15 units.
No,
15 units?
I've read this very quickly, skimmed it, but it seems to me they were originally talking about 30 housing units, and now they're talking about 45 homes.
no, I think it went from 40 to 45,
Really?
yeah.
You may be right. I don't know. I can't remember.
40 to 45
Because again,
homes.
like I said, in looking at the earlier plan, the only change I could really
Those five.
substantively identify was down there and then where the outlets were left, where the access was to go to the other parcels.
There's a lot of talk in this material from Graham and Associates about the length of the road,
Yes.
which again, I've only read quickly.
And a good discussion about changing that corner on Weathersfield Street.
Changing the corner.
Changing the
and
corner.
raising the road going in because of the flooding potential both at the Mill River and where Taylor Brook goes across.
Well, yeah, Graham was having a discussion, yeah, he raised that as an issue, and I'm not. Probably the thing to look at, surprisingly enough, Mr. DeCoulis spent a lot of time establishing the elevation of where the Mill River flooded onto those lots on Weathersfield Street.
Now, that river that goes up there, it doesn't just dead end there. Where's it go? Over into the Girl Scout camp?
What river?
See that river going right after crosses under the driveway?
That's Taylor Brook.
Brook.
Taylor Brook. It mostly actually follows the boundary line. Taylor Brook is the boundary line for a substantial, the western boundary of the Dodge Reservation. In this area, Taylor Brook is the boundary line. So
At this point, we're waiting for them to get their approvals?
We don't know. We're just talking.
in terms of him actually filing for a yes, he wants to see what occurs, whether there's issues with the planning board on the open space residential development or whatever, then he intends to file a notice of intent with us.
Well, this seems to be changed since the state said that Taylor Brook was perennial.
Yeah. What happened
The
with
state
that?
didn't say that. They were.
We initially said that.
But the
And-
state has to say that themselves, and they haven't said that yet.
No, they did.
Oh,
The state
so you
did
got
come
that
back and
right?
say it
Yeah,
wasn't.
they withdrew the request to amend the ORD, the ANRAD. The Order of Resource Area Delineation, they had requested that it be amended, and see, what happened
I thought
was,
that was a 3-year
what happened
project.
was, they were running a stream analysis from this point roughly.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually right about here, right where that funny little bend notch is. They were running the stream analysis from there, and then they found out that the state, their protocol calls for it to be run right at the boundary line of this parcel, which is where it intersects Taylor Lane or the Farm Road or whatever you want to call it. And so when you run the analysis from down at that point, it comes out perennial.
Yeah.
That it's enough, it grabs enough of this watershed to change the calculations and to tip the balance for both the square footage of the drainage area
Now, isn't that a
and
3-year
also the
project?
volume.
Isn't that a 3-year project that they have to file and announce every year when they do that?
No.
So with
No, you just, the USGS, you go to what's called the StreamStats website, and you establish the point, and you run the analysis there, because USGS has already worked it out using the topography and figuring out drainage basins and precipitation levels and
But
stuff.
somebody has to go out there and see that the info put in is the info that's coming out.
No,
You can
not,
do it without having to see
not
the screen?
specifically. The Wetlands Protection Act regulations are based on USGS data as presented. You don't really have to go out. Now,
If you wanna go the
you
other way
can,
though, right?
if you wanna go the other way, you can go out
Take
and
photos.
establish
Or try to prove it the other way around.
4 different days, not in a drought period, where you have absolutely no
That's what the
flow
coolest
in the stream channel.
Over on the golf course.
Emily Lane, right?
Yeah, well, you'd need a good sized boat to get in there right now.
Yeah.
And you could still say it's not a stream, but
So by them determining
I-
that that was perennial, how did that change what they could do with
they
that?
can build right down to it, rather than going 200
No,
feet
well,
from it.
see, what it did,
What did it force?
what I was trying to explain to you is that made all of this 200-foot riverfront instead of just whatever the width of the BVW is and then a 100-foot buffer zone to the BVW. So it substantially increased because the terrain there goes up quite a bit. It's almost a 10 to 12-foot drop down to that stream along this portion of what is called the orchard property. And it's all, that's why the pines are up in here. Remember I talking about that almost pure grove of eastern white pines that's up here? That's a pure grove of eastern white pines because it's all well-drained gravelly soils that are way above the water level.
So did that reduce the amount of homes you could put in there?
No.
Well, no,
Practically
it's,
increased it.
no. Well, it all depends. It means that the criteria that the planning board has, which is 50% wet, 50% dry in the open space parcel, that they don't have that, so they need to ask for the planning board's a waiver of that.
And that's what they're gonna do tomorrow? Are they
Well,
going
they've
in there?
started that process,
Okay,
yes,
I
and
got you.
in my input, based on the Conservation Commission, based on my discussions with you in the past, has been that we are in favor and we would like the planning board to support
Us getting that land.
the open space as configured. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very valuable to us because of its location, then the stream corridors, both sides of the Taylor Brook stream corridor, all of this area, geez, all of this area down here. I mean, there's huge wet meadow areas and it's all floodplain of the Mill River, and we've already got conservation land right there. Because the parcels on
Guess
the
what I'm trying
other,
to say is
the
before-
parcels at Front Weathersfield Street
But
there
when they
couldn't
were
be built
measuring
on.
from the other point, they didn't have to get a waiver. Now they do.
Yeah, if they had that 50-50, but because of the amount of riverfront,
Now they have to get a waiver from the planning.
because remember,
Okay.
riverfront doesn't equate to it being bordering vegetated wetlands or it having saturated soils or high groundwater. Riverfront can be quote-unquote high
Okay.
and
Oh,
dry,
I got you.
with no wetlands vegetation at all, and that's exactly what.
It's just a distance.
Yeah, just a-
Right,
Yeah.
it's, because it's a linear distance from mean annual high water, and that's all it is. So,
All right, do we have, there's nothing else on the agenda?
the discussion about
Oh,
possible
yes,
consideration
yes.
for
Right.
presenting an article for amendment to the wetlands bylaw.
Which we actually do not know enough about right now, so we can do some, if we have a chance to do some homework, we can figure out what we need to do to present to change this.
But we might as well tell you, so what happened is that there's a question about our process when we consider accepting land in lieu of our fee schedule. There isn't explicit verbiage, but when you read what is in our wetlands bylaw, and this is kind of like the same thing, like the fee schedule. When you read it, it isn't real explicit, but it gives you the apparent ability. So the idea is to address some of these non-specific issues in the wetlands bylaw, and especially the fee schedule, which I have advised the commission in the past. Most other towns, I know of, cities and towns, have their fee schedule outside the actual bylaw itself to allow the commission to revise it periodically, to make sure that it's reflective and the community that I was a commissioner in, the city of Haverhill, had theirs structured pretty closely to how the fee schedule is in the Wetlands Protection Act. So you didn't come out, in most cases, and I'm not saying that it never ever did, it sometimes did have much larger fees for projects than the Wetlands Protection Act did. But in most cases, it kind of followed the same thing and was reflective of what that community's commission felt, but could be revised and adjusted by the commission by just having a public hearing. When it's in your bylaw, the only way you can revise it and adjust it is to go to an article at town meeting. And so,
He's talking about putting them in regulations. We don't have any regulations at the moment.
right. But that would be a very good place for them to be, because a lot of communities who may not have a lot of text regulations will still have a fee schedule so that they can make modifications and adjustments without having to go to town meeting.
Town council was going to send you some possible language with regard to either other towns.
Well, they sent me
bylaws
some
and
examples, they
or
sent me
regs.
some examples of some other communities, and I need to start doing the research on that so I can bring something to you and present it. And I've also been told that we will have the assistance of town council in this effort.
Good. Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Jake, don't let me down. I'm getting.
My job.
Okay, all right.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.